there's something really anti-human about all of it, because it's like, oh, so you want to extinguish our differences? But that's the beauty of life, is in differences. The beauty of life is that you are not just a carbon copy of me.
Bold words there from Dave Smith, especially in an age in 2025 when equity and equality are all the rage. But in this podcast, Dave and Keith Knight, both of whom I know personally and enjoy a lot, lay out their case as to why equality and equity and egalitarianism in general is the enemy of humanity. I thought they made some interesting points. Let's check it out and react.
I remember getting a lot of flack from libertarians in the summer of 2020 because I was so outspoken against the riots, which again, it was like stunning to me. It was like, we're libertarians because we believe in private property rights and voluntary peaceful interactions, and I see a mob destroying private property. What about that is supposed to at all jive with my worldview? But I remember making the point and really taking some heat for this. But I was like, look, of all of these, the Black Lives Matters kind of like poster boys, all of their cases that they love to talk about, many of which I'm pretty much on the side of this was messed up. Like, it doesn't give you permission to go burn down a Wendy's, but like I do, I don't think that cop should have sat on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes. And I certainly think the Breonna Taylor case was an outrage, but there was just not one shred of evidence that either of them were racial issues.
Yeah.
And remember, during the Summer of Love, the so-called Summer of Love after the George Floyd issue, this was the justification that the corporate mainstream used to get us out of our homes. This was in the middle of the most rigid lockdowns in the country, and all of a sudden they're saying, oh, nope, now you have to go out and protest. That's when all this wanton property destruction happened.
Was never nothing. There was never even like a case presented as to why we think this happened because the officer was white. I mean, even though all the guys around Derek Chauvin were like an Asian and a black guy and all that, but it's not as if he said something. It's not like while he was doing it, he was like, yeah, you take that, you black motherfucker. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like there was like a racial aspect to it. It was just like, oh, well, the victims are black, and therefore this must be a racial issue. And that just doesn't make any sense. It's just like on a very simple common sense test. Like if there was a bar fight down the street and it was a white guy got in a fight with a black guy, you wouldn't just immediately go, well, it must have been racism. It's like, well, maybe they were fighting over a girl. Maybe one of them bumped into the other one. Maybe, like, there's a million different reasons why. And the fact, and it's something, it was crazy that the official movement, it seemed like, never even had to present an argument as to like, well, this is why it's a racial issue.
This is so true. And it's because to the people that push this, the narratives are the only thing that matters. It's not the truth. They have an agenda that they want to drive down their throats, and it's coded in this, mythical race war that doesn't really exist in the US. That's what they have to sell to get so many people on board with it.
Yeah, you would think that you look at the police and you say, all right, they have the right to arrest citizens. Citizens don't have the right to walk up to cops and arrest them. They can, stop and see if you're suspicious and maybe search through your car. You don't have the right to do that to them. They have the right to put you in jail if you violate one of their rules, but you don't have the right to do that to them. They have a monopoly on violence. People look at this and say, all right, they have a monopoly on violence. They give you orders. You must obey them. They're like, there's got to be a racial aspect to this. It's like, do you think the same thing? There's a much more plausible explanation for these things. What Wilfred Riley did at Kentucky State University is commit the ultimate thought crime. And he basically says he has to sort of gradually introduce his students to this. He goes, look, men are much more likely to commit violence against a person than a woman is. This is not me hating men, but statistically, that's true. Whether it's murder, rape, kidnapping, the perpetrator tends to be male.
That's misandry. No, not at all. Everyone acknowledges that, and it's not controversial.
As things are now, it roughly is about a 13-to-1 ratio when it comes to black on white violence. When it comes to rape, murder, assault, burglary, robbery, 13 times, every 13 times a black person does it to a white person statistically will do it one time to a black person. This 13-to-1 ratio is what got him a lot of heat. This was in a book titled Lies My Liberal Teacher Told Me. But this is a reality that people need to know about. So when they see disparities in prison, they don't flip out. Imagine, you have mentioned that you have a son on your show. Would you want your son to be raised to just say 95% of people killed by the police are male? You are just discriminated against because you're a boy. So don't bother working hard. Don't bother showing up on time. Don't go to a job and ask for on-the-job training. That's all buying into the system. You need to start a Male Lives Matter movement. Anytime a man is hurt, you need to start organizing with your friends, rioting, looting, focus on protesting a lot. Everything else is just buying into the system. You would be hurting your own son doing that. That is how Democrats are trying to raise Black America today, even when all of these statistics, not to mention competing anecdotes, are completely against their narrative.
Yeah, that's a mass gaslighting effect, and really that is one of the worst parts of the culture war, is it divides people that otherwise might unite on things like war and the financial system and corporate welfare. Keith is right on point right here.
That's the reality that they're just unwilling to address, and that's why I'm really hoping to see an end to wokeism when it comes to disparities between groups are proof of discrimination. I'm really hoping that this goes away.
Yeah, and of course, because it really is. Well, first of all, it's incoherent, obviously, as you've kind of very beautifully, laid it out. But it's also, as you mentioned, as Lou Rockwell was getting at, it's an attack on liberty. It's an attack on a free society, because even though the government doesn't actually bring any more equality, in fact, you could argue that they bring a more drastic inequality, because they have a higher authority than anybody else. They have more power, so inherently it's more unequal, at least the balance of power is. But the solution is always more government intervention. The solution is always some type of government problem. And as we know, with any degree of freedom, it brings disparate outcomes. Like that's the very nature of freedom, is that we can choose different paths, and then we're going to end up in different places. And there's no, why we would ever have the expectation of equality in outcomes makes absolutely no sense, or equality of opportunity for that matter. It just makes no sense. It's like the truth is that, we have lots of Irish people go into being firefighters, and lots of Asian people go into engineering, and lots of Jewish people go into literary works or banking or whatever. It's like these are just we see all around us that there are these different groups of people that tend to go into different areas, and it just seems like, why would we? There's something really anti-human about all of it, because it's like, oh, so you want to extinguish our differences? But that's the beauty of life, is in differences. The beauty of life is that you are not just a carbon copy of me.
And this is so right, and it's so true of so many of the egalitarian types that I run into. Even if you can get some of them to admit that, equal outcomes isn't something that we would want to desire for society, some of them will say, well, I do think there should be equal opportunities. But how can you possibly ensure that or enforce that? Because, yeah, I would like an equal opportunity to inherit $1 trillion fortune from someone, $1 billion fortune from someone. I would like the opportunity to win a $300 million NBA contract, but the fact is I can't exactly dunk as good as LeBron James. So this is a problem. Dave is so right when he says that freedom means that we'll end up in different places. We have to go different routes if we truly have freedom. Otherwise, we're just conforming to one particular path that society or the economic system or the powers that be set out for us.
Like, even two guys like me and you who have very similar political views, what would the point of me having you on my show be if you didn't have a different mind than me and kind of add something else and have some other information in your head that I didn't have in mine? And then it's so anti-human to oppose. It's essentially a war on uniqueness.
And it doesn't even properly reward the ambition which any sane society would like to reward. In Civil Rights Rhetoric or Reality, Thomas Sowell uses the example of Japanese Americans who came to America, didn't speak English, and by 1945, they are in Franklin Roosevelt's internment camps from his executive order. By 1959, they had incomes that equaled white incomes, and by 1969, they were earning 33% more than the average American family because they are extraordinarily ambitious even today. Whites do not earn more than all the other groups. You have Vietnamese Americans, Pakistani Americans, even Nigerian Americans, Filipino Americans, Chinese Americans, Taiwanese Americans. I believe, according to the 2018 US Census, where I last looked at these numbers, whites are like 11th or 12th on the list of ethnicities when it comes to income. So you're not even rewarding the very minorities who've engaged in very ambitious activities.
And this is so ironic too, because that is never, retorted by a saying like, well, it's just because of Japanese supremacy movements that's the case. It's never said that way. And the same thing goes for its connection to immigration too, is like, people would never accuse the Asian societies like Japan and China, despite being basically totally homogenous and having almost no immigration, as being, racist for it. So there really is kind of an agenda here, and it's just pointed in one direction, despite the fact that, some races are outperforming whites. But I don't take that and say, hey, that's because of Asian superiority. It'd just be so laughable. It just falls apart on face value. So Keith is right.
In the first place. So it's so detrimental. It's not just like this homicidal of, I hate these people, I want to push them down. It's even like suicidal. I don't even want to be part of a society that rewards good behavior. Those people can go somewhere else. We don't have meritocracy here. You're even hurting yourself in the long run. So that is what I see as the ultimate case against the woke racist left and the woke economic left.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So I think Dave and Keith were right on in this podcast. The entirety made some really good points. The great libertarian philosopher, who I'm a huge fan of, Murray Rothbard, once said, egalitarianism is a revolt against nature. And it truly is, because to truly ensure that people have the same outcomes and same opportunities means necessarily that you have to remove certain freedoms to go into certain professions, go into certain trades, take a specific approach that not everyone else would take. This is all due to the regulatory state and, DEI schemes that try to, fit people in singular boxes, despite the fact that humans are very different in many respects and often want to make a living different ways. And, it does not capture the essence of these issues to just put it down to one arbitrary criteria that divides people, which is race. It's just so stupid and laughable. And I think more people are starting to understand that. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about this? Is equality a revolt against nature? Is it the enemy of humanity? Let me know in a comment below. And like this video, subscribe to the channel. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. All right, peace out.